The spotlight was hot, but the crowd was cold. That's the risk of an open mic in Graybridge on a Tuesday. The rain hammering the roof of the blue lamp didn't help. It was the kind of night where people came to drink, not to laugh. I could feel my set, my 5 precious, labored-over minutes slipping away. "So, I'm on this new dating app," I said, leaning into the microphone. The cheap metal felt damp. "It's for people who love the smell of old books and crippling debt. It's called grad school." A single, lonely cough from the back. I was bombing. My dream of being a writer, of trading my bar rag for a script, was dying a slow death under flickering blue neon. "I work here. I wipe down the counters these people are currently moping on." You'd think they'd throw me a pity chuckle. Desperate, I scanned the room for a target. My eyes landed on the VIP booth, the one sectioned off by a sad velvet rope. It was always empty, except tonight. Tonight, it held one man. He was in a suit that probably cost more than my entire apartment building. It was dark, tailored, and looked out of place, like a panther sitting in a dog pound. He wasn't drinking beer. He had a short glass of something amber. He wasn't watching me. He was staring into the rain-lashed window, perfectly still. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was the desperation. Maybe it was the fact that he was the only person in the room pointedly not looking at me. "Check out the guy in the booth," I said, pointing. The spotlight operator, my coworker Ben, was asleep at the switch, so I was just gesturing into the darkness. Mr. Tall, dark and brooding. Looks like he just walked off a movie set, or maybe he just buried a body. A few nervous titters. Okay, a reaction. "Seriously," and I pushed. "Look at that suit, the intense stare. Bet he's a criminal." The words hung in the stale, beer-soaked air. And the man turned. He didn't just glance. It was a slow, deliberate rotation of his head, as if his neck moved on oiled bearings. The dim blue light caught the angles of his face. Sharp jaw, straight nose, eyes so dark they looked like holes punched in the light. He wasn't smiling. He just watched me. The entire bar went silent. You could hear the rain again, hissing against the glass. My heart did a kick-flip against my ribs. My face burned. I had just called out, in a room full of strangers. The most dangerous-looking man I had ever seen. He raised his glass, a tiny, almost imperceptible salute. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried over the hum of the bar fridge, clear as a bell. Worse. And then, the impossible happened. The bar erupted, not in titters, but in a wave of deep, rolling laughter. They thought it was part of the act, a brilliant, improvised 2-liner. I just stood there, mic in hand, blushing down to my collarbone. I managed to stammer out a transition. Worse. What's worse than a criminal, a landlord? A guy who brings an acoustic guitar to a party? I got the laugh. I'd recovered, but my hands were shaking. I finished my set, my eyes refusing to look back at that booth. When the light finally dropped, I practically ran off the small stage, my set closing to genuine applause. He was gone by the time I was back behind the bar, pouring a draft for a regular. A crack of thunder split the sky, rattling the bottles on the shelf. "That was nuts, Talia," Ben said, finally awake. "That guy in the booth, who was he?" "No idea," I muttered, wiping a spill. That's when I saw him. Not the man in the suit, but his shadow. A shorter, powerfully built man in a heavy coat was at the end of the bar. Ivo Wren. I knew his name because he came in sometimes. Never spoke, just watched. He worked for, well, people you don't name. He'd been sitting at a small table near the booth. He stood up, placed cash on the bar for his boss's drink, and then added a crisp $100 bill right on my tip jar. My jaw dropped. That was more than I made in 2 shifts. As I reached for it, he placed a folded napkin on the bar. His gaze flicked to me, then to the door. He enjoyed the show, Ivo said, his voice like gravel. He nodded at the napkin. "A suggestion for your closing." He left. I unfolded the napkin. It wasn't a joke. It was 5 words written in sharp, clean script. "Don't go home the alleyway." My shift ended at 2 in the morning. The rain hadn't just continued, it had declared war. It was coming down in solid, wind-blasted sheets that made the streetlights look like drowned stars. The last of the regulars stumbled out, and I locked the heavy front door of the blue lamp. The warning on the napkin felt stupid now. The alley was my shortcut. It cut 10 minutes off my trip, but my scooter, a vintage piece of junk that was more rust than metal, was parked back there. I sighed, popped the back door, and stepped into the narrow canyon between the bar and the bakery. The alley stank of wet garbage and old bread. The rain was deafening. I threw my leg over the scooter, turned the key, and kicked the starter. Chug, sputter, whine. Nothing? Oh, come on, Betsy, I pleaded, kicking it again. Not tonight, please. Betsy coughed, sputtered a puff of blue smoke, and died. I was stranded, 2 a.m, in the worst part of Dockline, in a biblical flood, with a dead scooter. I wanted to cry. Instead, I put my head down, gripped the cold handlebars, and started the long, humiliating push home. Dockline is rough on a good day. At night, in the rain, it's a graveyard with pretensions. Every boarded-up warehouse looked like a tomb. My sneakers were soaked through in 30 seconds. I heard them before I saw them, the splash of boots, heavier than mine, and a low chuckle that wasn't friendly. Well, look at that. It's the funny girl. I stopped, my breath catching. 3 of them. They slouched out from the mouth of a side street, fanning out to block my path. The dock rats, local losers who thought petty extortion made them kings. The one in the middle, a guy with a greasy blonde ponytail named Slice, had a nasty grin. Saw your clip. Quill, he said, wiping rain from his nose. My buddy posted it. You're famous. Great. Send my regards to your buddy, I said, trying to push the scooter around them. My voice was shaking. Slice put a hand on my handlebars, stopping me. Thing is, you're performing in our neighborhood, and fame it costs. We're gonna need a nightly fee. I made $12 in tips tonight. Slice, not counting the weird one. Get out of my way. She's lippy, another one said, stepping closer. He smelled like cheap whiskey and mildew. We saw the clip, Slice insisted, his eyes narrowing. You're getting noticed. We want a piece, let's say 50%. 50% of $12, you do the math, I snapped, adrenaline making me stupidly brave. Slice's grin vanished. Maybe we just take the scooter. Maybe you just... He shoved me, hard. I stumbled back, losing my grip. The scooter crashed onto its side, the mirror cracking on the wet pavement. That's when the headlights hit us. They didn't just drive up, they appeared. A black SUV, glossy as wet obsidian, slid to a stop, its high beams pinning us like rats in a trap. The engine was a low, threatening rumble. The 3 rats froze. The driver's door opened. Emilio De Laurentiis stepped out into the rain, and he wasn't wearing an overcoat. His perfect suit was getting soaked, but he didn't seem to notice or care. He moved with an unhurried, terrifying grace. He stopped about 10 feet away, the rain plastering his dark hair to his head. He looked at the 3 rats. He looked at my overturned scooter. Then his dark eyes found mine. Problem, he asked. His voice was just as quiet as it had been in the bar. Slice, trying to reclaim his phantom authority, puffed out his chest. This ain't your business, suit. Just collecting a fee. To prove his point, he grabbed my arm and shoved me again, pushing me toward Emilio. See, she's fine. Emilio moved. It wasn't a fight. It was an adjustment. He closed the distance in a single step, his left hand catching Slice's wrist mid-shove. His right hand came up, not in a fist, but with an open palm that cupped Slice's elbow. There was a tight, muffled sound, like popping a vacuum seal. Slice screamed. It was a high, wet sound that was swallowed by the rain. He dropped to his knees, his face white. Emilio hadn't broken the arm. He'd simply dislocated it, with the precision of a surgeon. A masterclass in leverage, all in one clean, fluid motion. Emilio held him there, letting the pain sink in. The other two rats hadn't moved. They were statues. "Apologize to her," Emilio said, his voice still calm. "I'm sorry," Slice whimpered, tears mixing with the rain. Emilio released the wrist as if dropping a piece of trash. Slice scrambled back, clutching his arm, and fled into the darkness, his two friends right behind him. The silence that fell was heavier than the rain. It was just me, him, and the sound of my heart hammering. I was fine," I stammered, bending to pick up my scooter. My whole body was rattling, a combination of adrenaline and the biting cold. He watched me struggle for a second. "You're shaking." "It's just the cold." He took a step, and I flinched. He stopped. He didn't say anything. He just shrugged off his suit jacket, the one that cost more than my scooter. He held it out. "No, I can't. It's soaked," I said. He didn't argue. He just stepped forward and draped it over my shoulders. It was impossibly warm. The weight of it was immediate, like a shield. And the smell. The prompt in my head was leather and rain, but it was expensive leather, rain, and a clean, sharp scent like ozone, like the air right after lightning strikes. It was the most dangerous and the safest I had ever felt. A beam of light cut through the alley. A squad car, but not a regular patrol. This one was dark gray, with the crisp, militant logo of the Civic Integrity Bureau, the CIB, the city's internal hunters. They were the ones who cleaned up messes. And rumor was they made just as many. The spotlight hit us, blinding me. "That's CIB," I whispered, terrified. "They're not good." Emilio didn't even look at the car. His eyes stayed locked on mine. The light painted him in harsh white, making his face look like a marble statue. "You have a choice, Talia," he said, using my name for the first time. It sounded strange, coming from him. "You can stand in my shadow, or you can stand in their spotlight." I looked at the CIB car. They weren't getting out, they were just watching. Their spotlight and accusation. I knew their reputation. They'd take me in for questioning, and I'd be stuck in bureaucratic hell for hours, answering for the gang-related incident. They'd see my dockline address and my empty bank account and decide I was the problem. I looked at Emilio De Laurentiis, a man who had just taken apart another human being with his bare hands and hadn't even blinked, a man who knew my name. My survival instinct, the one honed by years of bad gigs and late-night walks home, made the choice for me. I took one step back, placing myself fully behind him, in his shadow. The CIB car sat there for one long, stretched-out second, then, without a siren, without a word, the spotlight clicked off, the car backed up, executed a three-point turn, and drove away. They didn't just leave, they retreated, as if they'd been warned off. Emilio watched them go, then he turned to the SUV. The back door opened, pushed from the inside by a driver I couldn't see. "My driver will take you home," he said. It wasn't a request. Ivo Ren was suddenly there, emerging from the rain like a phantom. He nodded at Emilio, effortlessly lifted my broken scooter, and secured it on a rack on the back of the SUV. I hesitated. You don't have to." Emilio just looked at me. He opened the passenger door himself and waited. I got in. The inside was silent, plush, and smelled like his jacket, leather and lightning. He slid into the seat beside me. "Not in the back." He nodded to the driver. The SUV pulled away from the curb as smoothly as a boat. We drove in silence for 3 blocks. I stared out the window, watching my ruined neighborhood slide by. I was sitting next to a man who scared the CIB. I was wearing his jacket. "Don't joke about the man in the VIP booth," he said, his voice low and smooth as the car's suspension, "until you know why he's sitting alone." My defenses, my only weapon, kicked in. "I joke about everything," I said, my voice coming out stronger than I felt. "It's what I do." I risked a glance at him. In the dim glow of the dashboard lights, I saw the corner of his mouth lift, just barely, a small, humorless laugh. "Good," he said. "Comedy is the only polite form of survival left." The car stopped outside my apartment building. Ivo already had the scooter propped by the front door, which he was holding open. I took off the jacket. It felt like removing armor. "Thank you." He took it without a word, his fingers brushing mine. It was a tiny, accidental contact, but it felt like an electric shock. I got out and ran through the rain to the door. I didn't look back until I was inside my building's lobby. I watched through the scratched glass as the SUV disappeared. I was soaked, shaking, and my scooter was broken, but I was home. I went to lock my scooter to the banister, and I saw it. Tied to the key in the ignition was a small, intricately carved charm. It was made of silver, glinting in the dim lobby light. A fishbone. I knew this symbol. Everyone in Dockline knew it. It wasn't a good luck charm. It was a marker, a sign of protection from the De Laurentiis family. It meant hands off. It meant this belongs to us. I stood there, my hand frozen, the cold metal charm in my palm. I had to wonder, did I just make a joke that provoked the most powerful man in the city, or did I just audition? The fishbone charm was cold against my palm when I woke up. For a second, I thought I'd dreamed it all: the rain, the alley, the man who moved like a shadow, the CIB car melting away. Then I saw the notice taped to my apartment door. It wasn't a dream. The paper was bright, offensive orange, and the words were stark. Final notice of eviction, and my third-floor walk-up with its leaky radiator in view of a brick wall was being ripped out from under me. The owner wasn't my usual slumlord, but a new entity, East Row Holdings. I'd never heard of them. The legalese was dense, but the message was simple. They were jacking up the rent by 120%, effective immediately, or I was out in 3 days. The silver fishbone felt heavy in my hand. Protection. What a joke. It couldn't protect me from this. I was late for my other job. I jammed the charm into my pocket, grabbed my bag, and ran down the 3 flights of stairs. My scooter, Betsy, was exactly where Ivo had left her, still broken, still mocking me. I kicked the fender, which only hurt my foot, and started the long walk to the Caffeine Caravan. The Caffeine Caravan is a bright blue coffee truck permanently parked in a lot that smells like old fish and new coffee. It's my morning gig. The one that actually pays the bills, the blue lamp doesn't. Mrs. Greer, the owner, was wiping down the chrome espresso machine. She's a woman in her late 60s with iron gray hair and a tight bun and the kindest eyes in Graybridge. She looked up when I hustled in, and her smile faded. "You're shaking, Talia," she said, not unkindly. "You okay?" "Just rent troubles, Mrs. G, the usual." She poured me a small cup of black coffee, her movements precise. "That's not all, is it?" she whispered, leaning closer over the counter. The hiss of the milk steamer covered her words. "A car was here this morning, before sunrise." My stomach tightened. "What kind of car?" "Dark gray, official, the kind with no sense of humor." She meant the CIB. 2 men in suits. They asked about you. The coffee cup stopped halfway to my lips. About me. What did they ask? Your full name, your shift schedule, which way you usually walk home. She put her hand on mine. Her skin was warm and papery. I told them you were unreliable, always late, and that I was thinking of firing you. I told them you take the bus. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "Thank you." "Talia," she said, her eyes dead serious, "coffee is coffee. You are a good kid. Whatever shadow you stepped in last night, step out of it fast." The shadow. That's exactly what he'd called it. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, relieved for the distraction. It was an email. The subject line made my heart leap. "Booking inquiry, Laugh Spout Live." Laugh Spout was the biggest streaming comedy channel in the state. Getting a spot with them was everything. It was the dream. "I'm writing to invite you to a paid guest spot on our Friday night showcase." It read, "We loved your clip from the blue lamp." My clip the one Slice had mentioned. "Please click the link below to confirm your slot and fill out your performer details. We need it by 5 p.m. today." My hands were shaking for a different reason now. 120% rent hike, the CIB at my coffee truck, and a career-making gig, all before 9 in the morning. This city was a roller coaster designed to give you whiplash. I clicked the link, my thumb barely working. It took me to a simple online form. Name, contact, bank details for payment. I filled it out in a blur, my heart pounding with a sudden, desperate hope. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the escape hatch. I met Juno Park at Kingspere during my lunch break. Kingspere is where the old city meets the water, a long stretch of rotting wood and new, gentrified oyster bars. Juno was pure information, a freelance reporter who ran on caffeine and paranoia. She was waiting for me on a bench, laptop open, camera bag at her feet. "You look like hell, T," she said, not looking up from her screen. "You look like you haven't slept," I countered, sitting down. The air was thick with salt and diesel. "Sleep is for people who aren't chasing the Arroyo Syndicate." The name hit me like a physical thing. The Arroyos. They were the ones who actually ran Dockline. The dock rats were just noise. The Arroyos were the signal. "What about them?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Juno finally looked at me, pushing her glasses up her nose. "What about them? They're making a move, a big one. They've been quiet for a year, but now they're buying up debt. Properties, commissions. They're squeezing the whole waterfront." She pointed her pen at my eviction notice, which I'd been clutching in my hand. "Let me guess. East Row Holdings." My blood went cold. "How did you know?" "It's their signature. They're a front. They're buying everything, and Talia," she lowered her voice, "they're going after anyone and everyone who has even the slightest connection to the De Laurentiis family." De Laurentiis, the name he hadn't said, the name Evo hadn't said, the name I knew because everyone in Graybridge knew it. "Why?" "Because De Laurentiis is the waterfront, he's the border," she said. "The Arroyos want to erase it. They're looking for leverage, a weak link, a pressure point." She looked me dead in the eye. "Last night at the Blue Lamp you were seen. You talked to him, and then his man, Ren, left a marker on your scooter. T. You're not a pressure point, you're a spotlight." My phone rang. The sound was so loud in the sudden silence it made me jump. I didn't recognize the number. It was just a string of zeros. "You gonna get that?" Juno asked, eyeing the screen. I answered, "Hello? I need my jacket." The voice. It was him. Emilio De Laurentiis. It was deep, quiet, and stripped of all emotion. It wasn't a voice that asked. It was a voice that stated facts. My brain stalled. My heart hammered. The only thing that came out of my mouth was the stupid, terrified truth. It doesn't smell like leather and rain," I blurted out. "It smells like expensive lawyers, like you could sue the rain and win." There was a pause, a silence so heavy I could feel the cellular dead air. Then, a sound. It was almost a cough, a quiet, single exhalation, a laugh, maybe. "Moth and Matchstick," he said. "The bookstore on Ash Street, 1 hour." He hung up. Juno was staring at me. "Who was that?" I have to go." "Talia," she grabbed my arm, her face pale. "You are walking into the middle of a war. These are not open mic hecklers. These are monsters." "One of them just got me a gig at Laugh Spout," I lied, pulling my arm free. "I'll be fine." Moth and Matchstick was my favorite place in the city. It smelled like paper dust, vanilla and thyme. It was the antithesis of Emilio De Laurentiis. He was standing in the philosophy section, in a different suit, this one a charcoal gray, just as perfect as the last. He wasn't browsing, he was just standing. I was holding his jacket, which I'd salvaged from my apartment floor. It was still damp. "Here," I said, holding it out. He didn't take it. He was holding a book, a thin paperback, a collection of classic stand-up routines, a replacement Naue, he said, holding it out to me. We stood there, a weird, silent offering, a jacket for a book. I took the book, and he took the jacket, folding it neatly over his arm. "Thank you," I said, looking at the cover. "You earned it." He opened the book to the title page. He'd written something inside, in the same sharp, clean script as the napkin. "Don't sell your smile cheaply." I also got an email from Laugh Spout," I said, feeling the need to fill the silence. They're giving me a spot. Because of last night." His eyes, which had been on the book, lifted to mine. There was no warmth in them, just intensity. "They are not." "What?" "Laugh Spout is not booking you. Talia, they don't book from 5-minute open mics." Before I could argue, the bell on the shop door slammed open, jingling violently. 2 men in CIB windbreakers pushed in, followed by a third man in a rumpled suit, Inspector Kellen Bryce. I recognized him from Juno's blog. He had a face like a spoiled potato and eyes that moved like restless insects. "All right, folks, CIB," Bryce announced to the empty store. "Routine check. Anti-money laundering compliance. We're checking all cash-based businesses in the area." He saw us, and his eyes settled on me. They lingered, unpleasantly. "We're just customers," I said. Emilio said nothing. He hadn't tensed. He hadn't moved. But the air around him had gone cold. Bryce ignored him and sauntered over to me, his gaze crawling over my jeans and old t-shirt. "Talia Quill, right 3rd floor, 19 Dock Line. 2 months behind on rent to East Row Holdings." My blood turned to slush. He knew. He knew about the notice. That's a private matter," I stammered. "It's a public record." Bryce smiled, a slick, oily movement of his lips. "An East Row. They play rough. Be a shame if a young, talented woman like you ended up on the street. Course resourceful people can always find a way to work things out if you're willing to cooperate." He was offering me a deal, inform on Emilio, be his spy, and my housing problem would go away. A hand touched my elbow. It was Emilio. It wasn't a pull, not a push. It was a simple, proprietary touch, guiding me a single step back so that I was standing slightly behind him. A reflex, a shield. Bryce's smile tightened. He finally addressed Emilio. "And you are?" Emilio didn't give his name, and he just looked at Bryce, his expression utterly flat. "You're running an Alpha 6 violation, Inspector." It was just a name, Alpha 6. It sounded like nonsense. But Kellen Bryce froze. The color drained from his face, leaving it a pasty gray. His slick smile vanished, replaced by a twitch at the corner of his eye. He looked from Emilio to his 2 uniformed officers, who suddenly looked very nervous. "Our mistake," Bryce said, his voice suddenly strangled. We have the wrong address." He turned, gesturing sharply to his men. "We're done here." They left. They didn't just walk. They practically fled, the bell on the door jangling in their wake. The silence they left behind was deafening. I stepped away from Emilio, my arm tingling where he'd touched it. What was that? What the hell was that? CIB? I know it was CIB the power game. You just snapped your fingers and he ran. I don't need you playing power games for me. He turned to face me fully. We were standing between history and poetry. He threatened your home. He offered you a deal to turn on me. That wasn't a power game. That was an intrusion. And what do you call knowing I'm 2 months behind on rent? I shot back. What do you call knowing my route home from the coffee truck? What do you call that? He didn't flinch. Information. He used it as a weapon. I have not. And that was the terrifying truth. He knew. He knew everything. The bad debt, the 2 jobs, the broken scooter. He knew. And he hadn't used any of it. He'd just watched. The rain started again. A sudden, violent drumming against the bookstore's skylight. It was a downpour. Just like last night, we were trapped in the quiet, dusty store, surrounded by the sound of water. The moment stretched, tight as a piano wire. He looked out the front window at the wall of rain. "Don't be alone tonight," he said, his voice quiet. A bitter, defensive laugh escaped me. I'm always alone. It's my default setting. I live alone. I walk home alone. I bomb on stage alone. He didn't turn from the window. He just nodded, as if I'd confirmed something for him. Not anymore. He gestured with his chin, not to me, but to my jacket pocket, the pocket where I'd shoved the silver fishbone charm, the marker, the claim, the border. My bank card was declined at the coffee truck ATM. Insufficient funds. The green screen flashed, mocking me. I pulled up my banking app. My balance wasn't just low, it was non-existent. My account, with its glorious $12.48, was frozen. Not by the bank. The notification was chillingly specific. Temporary security hold initiated by the Harbor and Freight Commission of New Avalon. The HFCO, the people who run the docks. I've never been to the docks, not the commercial side. I don't own a boat. I don't import anything. The CIB freezes assets, not the Freight Commission. "Everything all right, Talia?" Mrs. Greer asked, her hands covered in pastry flour. "Just technical difficulties," I muttered, my pulse starting to thrum with a low, dull panic. The eviction notice, the CIB harassment, and now my money. They weren't just pushing me, they were trying to erase me. I sent a frantic text to Juneau HF Co. Why would the Harbor and Freight Commission freeze my bank account? Her reply came 3 minutes later. It wasn't a text. It was a photograph, taken with a long focus lens, grainy and stark. 2 men, built like refrigerators, were walking out of a corrugated steel building, Warehouse 7. The sign above them was unmistakable, HFCO, Impound and Inspection. I knew the men, they were Arroyo lieutenants. Juneau's text followed. T. The HFCO isn't just at the docks. They are the docks. The Arroyos have owned the commissioner for a year. They're using it as a private piggy bank and a hammer. They're squeezing. So, East Row Holdings, an Arroyo front takes my apartment. The HFCO, an Arroyo puppet, takes my money. This was his fault. Emilio De Laurentiis, his protection, that little silver fishbone, wasn't a shield. It was a target. It was a kick me sign taped to my back. I was supposed to not be alone tonight. I was supposed to stand in his shadow. But that shadow felt like a cage, a place where things were done to me. I'm a comedian. My job is to observe, to find the crack in the logic, the detail everyone else misses, and put a spotlight on it. I wasn't going to sit in my cold apartment, waiting for the marshals, waiting for Emilio to snap his fingers and fix it. I was going to find the punchline. I still had the neon orange safety vest and messenger bag from a food delivery gig I'd worked 2 summers ago. I put my hair up under a nondescript baseball cap, grabbed the clipboard from my desk, and left my apartment. I didn't take the broken scooter. I took my old 10-speed, the one with the squeaky chain. The HFCO freight yard was chaos. It was designed to be trucks idling, forklifts beeping in reverse, men in hard hats yelling over the noise. It was the perfect cover. I tucked in behind a produce truck, kept my head down, and walked past the main gate like I was late and annoyed. Nobody looks twice at someone who looks like they're supposed to be there. I found Warehouse 7. It was set back from the main drag, quiet. It was supposed to be impound, where they held seized or damaged goods. It looked more like a private showroom. I slipped behind a stack of steel drums, my heart rattling against my ribs. The main office door was propped open with a rubber wedge. Inside, I could hear a man yelling at someone on the phone. "Don't care what the manifest says. It's damaged. You hear me? 100% write-off." He walked out, slamming the phone down, and headed toward the loading bay, his back to me. He left a heavy, old-school accounting ledger open on his desk. I slipped inside. The office smelled like stale coffee and wet cardboard. I didn't have much time. I looked at the ledger. It wasn't for HFSO. The header read Restoration Allocation. It was a list of damaged goods, flat-screen TVs, crates of high-end sneakers, medical supplies. Next to each entry was a dollar amount and a notation, E, C, R, F. The East Coast Restoration Fund. Juneau had mentioned them, a massive, heavily promoted charity for revitalizing the waterfront. A shell. This was it. This was the laundry. They were seizing goods at the dock, damaging them on paper, and then billing the shell charity for the loss. I fumbled for my phone and snapped 2 quick pictures. I turned to leave. My hip bumped the desk. A metal tin full of paper clips went skittering across the surface and crashed to the concrete floor. The yelling outside stopped. Who the hell is in my office? I bolted. I ran out the main office door just as the manager, a big, thick-necked man with a face like a bulldog, was rounding the corner. "Hey!" he roared. A proximity alarm I hadn't even seen started to whoop, a high-pitched, piercing shriek. I ran. I didn't know where I was going, just away, weaving between towering stacks of containers. I heard his heavy boots right behind me. I ducked into a narrow gap between two containers, a dark, tight space, and slammed into a chain-link fence, a dead end. He was there a second later, blocking the only exit, silhouetted against the gray light. "Gotcha, you little spy," he snarled, advancing on me. His name tag read, Marlowe Finch. I'm lost," I stammered, backing against the fence. "I'm looking for a delivery." "Sure you are." He lunged, grabbing the front of my safety vest and slamming me back against the chain link. The metal rattled against my skull. "Who sent you?" "Was it De Laurentiis?" I gasped, struggling against his grip, my jacket, zipped up under the vest, pulled taut. The zipper slid down 2 inches. The silver fishbone charm, which I'd put on a cheap chain, swung free, glinting in the dim light. Finch saw it. He stopped. His eyes, which had been narrowed in anger, went wide. His grip on my vest didn't just loosen, it went slack. He stumbled back a step, as if he'd been burned. What the hell is that?" he whispered, his face pale. He wasn't scared of me. He was terrified of it. I didn't wait to explain. I used his stunned hesitation. I kicked him, hard, in the shin, and scrambled under his arm. "Wait, stop!" he yelled, but his voice was different. It wasn't angry, it was panicked. He didn't chase me. He just shouted to the yard, "Lock the perimeter, find her now." I ran, adrenaline screaming in my ears. I found an open container, one marked with a citrus logo, and dove inside, pulling the heavy door almost shut. It was pitch black. The air was thick and cloying, a suffocating, artificial orange smell. I crouched behind a wooden crate, my whole body shaking so violently I could barely breathe. I had to silence my phone. I fumbled in my pocket. My hands were slick with sweat. The phone slipped, bouncing off my knee and hitting the metal floor of the container. The screen lit up. The Laugh Spout app icon, the one I downloaded from the booking link, flashed on the screen. It wasn't just an app. A red bar appeared at the top of my screen. Live. It was broadcasting. I had just sent a live 10-second video of the dark, orange-scented interior of my hiding spot to whoever was on the other end of that link. I snatched the phone, my thumb jamming the power button, killing the feed, but it was too late. Footsteps, right outside the container, not the heavy, panicked boots of Marlowe Finch. These were quiet, measured, patient. The container door slid open. Not with a bang, but with a smooth, oiled glide. Gray light flooded the space, blinding me. A figure stood silhouetted against the opening. It was Ivo Wren. He looked, as always, completely, utterly bored. "You are not," he observed, his voice flat, "a delivery driver." He didn't wait for an answer. "This way, quickly." He didn't lead me out the door I'd come in. He led me to the back of the container. He pushed on a section of the wall which clicked and opened, revealing a false panel. "What?" "De Laurentiis property," he said, pushing me through. We were in a concrete service tunnel, lit by bare bulbs spaced 20 feet apart. It smelled of damp earth, ozone, and the river. "Where are we?" I whispered, hurrying to keep up with his long strides. The city leased this utility corridor to the De Laurentiis family in 1950 for port development. The city's lease expired. His did not. He forgot to tell them. We walked for what felt like a mile, the whoop of the dock alarms fading above us. It was a secret city, a network of legal loopholes and gray concrete. The tunnel ended at a heavy, windowless steel door. Ivo pushed it open, and we stepped into a clean, brightly lit subterranean garage. The black SUV was parked in the center. Emilio De Laurentiis was leaning against it. He wasn't in a suit. He was wearing dark trousers and a simple black cashmere sweater, his sleeves pushed up his forearms. He looked less like a CEO and more like a panther at rest. The overhead fluorescent lights were cold, and so were his eyes. They were the color of the sea just before a storm. "You chose to walk into the lion's den without telling anyone," he said. His voice was quiet. It was the quietest, most dangerous sound I had ever heard. "You're not my keeper," I snapped, the adrenaline finally finding an outlet. My voice was shaking, but I didn't care. "They froze my bank account. They're taking my home. I'm not some pet you can just protect. I don't need you to fight my battles." "If you had told me," he said, pushing off the car, "I would have forbidden it." He took a step toward me. I stood my ground. "I know," I shot back. "That's why I didn't tell you I'm not your property. Emilio." He stopped, barely a foot away. I had to crane my neck to look up at him. I could feel the heat radiating off him. His chest rose and fell in a slow, controlled rhythm. "Yes," he said, his voice a low rumble that I felt in my own chest. "I would have forbidden it, and you would still be alive to joke about it." The air went out of me. The stupid, hot-headed bravery evaporated, leaving me cold. He was right. Finch would have broken my arm, or worse, if he hadn't seen that charm. My hands were trembling again. I fumbled for my phone. I got this," I stammered, my bravado gone. "They're using the HFCO. They're moving damaged goods and laundering the money through a shell, the East Coast Restoration Fund." I held out the phone, showing him the picture of the ledger. He didn't take it. He just stared at the screen, his dark eyes scanning the image. His focus was absolute. He looked at it for maybe 3 seconds. "He's getting sloppy," he said, almost to himself. He looked at Evo. "She can't go back to her apartment. Finch seeing the charm, the Arroyos will assume she's my agent. They'll escalate from financial pressure to physical." He opened the back door of the SUV. "Get in." This time, I didn't argue. We drove for 20 minutes, leaving the grit of Dockline, heading up into the hills to the old, overgrown Calder estates. The houses up here were all dead, monuments to old money. Except one. He turned down a private, unmarked lane. We pulled up to a structure that looked like a giant soap bubble. It was all glass and black steel, a perfect, futuristic dome set in the middle of a wild, unkempt garden, a fortress made of windows. "The Calder Glass House," and he said, "My grandfather won it in a card game." We stepped inside. The air was still and cool. The sun was setting, and the glass walls reflected us. As we walked across the polished stone floor, it looked like 2 other people, 2 ghosts of ourselves, were walking parallel to us, just on the other side of the glass. "Give me your phone," he commanded. I handed it to him. He didn't look at my pictures. He just turned it over in his hands. "You clicked the link." "What?" "The laugh spout offer." He wasn't asking. It was a smart move. They knew you were ambitious. He ran his thumb along the edge of the casing, and with a faint click, the back cover came off. They also knew you were desperate. He didn't look at the software. His eyes went right to the battery. He used a fingernail to pry at the contact point, and there, stuck to the underside of the battery with a piece of black tape, was a chip. It was no bigger than a grain of rice. "This wasn't just tracking your location. Talia," he said, peeling the tiny chip off, "it's a microphone, high grade, voice activated." He dropped the chip onto the glass coffee table between us. It made a tiny, pathetic tink. "The 10-second live clip in the container," he said, his voice flat. "That wasn't an accident. Your panic activated their sensor. You broadcast your hiding spot directly to them." I stared at the chip, the gig, the hope, the chance to escape. It was all a lie, a hook, a microphone. "They were using my comedy," I whispered, the realization settling in my stomach like cold lead. Emilio looked out at the darkening garden, his reflection staring back at him. "They don't want your voice, Talia. They want to turn it into an echo, a trap, to catch me." The tiny rice-sized piece of metal sat on the glass table between us. It was an accusation. It was the punctuation mark on the lie that had been my only hope. Outside, the storm that had been threatening all day finally broke, throwing handfuls of rain against the glass walls of the safe house. The sound was deafening, like we were trapped inside a drum. My adrenaline from the warehouse was gone, replaced by a bone-deep, penetrating cold. The shock was setting in. My gig, my big break, my escape hatch from East Row Holdings was a microphone. They had used my own ambition as a weapon against me. I started to shake. It wasn't a small tremor. It was a full-body rattle I couldn't control. Emilio watched me, his face unreadable in the gray, watery light. He didn't say, "It'll be okay," or "Don't worry." He simply turned, walked to a large, carved cedar chest in the corner, and opened it. He pulled out a heavy wool blanket the color of charcoal. He didn't ask. He just draped it over my shoulders. The weight was instant and grounding. It smelled like cedar and something dry and clean, like old paper. It was heavy, like his jacket had been, but this felt more permanent. They used my jokes," I whispered, pulling the blanket tighter. My teeth were chattering. They took my one thing and they made it a trap. Emilio moved to the wall of glass, standing with his back to me, watching the storm assault the garden. The cashmere sweater he wore, the one from the garage, pulled tight across his shoulders in the dim light. I saw it, a faint pucker in the fabric, high on his left shoulder, near the collar. I don't know why I asked. Maybe because I'd just been stripped bare, and I needed to see a crack in his armor. "What's that?" He didn't turn. "What?" "On your shoulder. I can see a mark." He paused, then glanced back. He'd caught me staring. He didn't seem angry, just resigned. He hooked a finger in the neck of his sweater and pulled it aside. It was a scar, not a slash, not a jagged line. It was a small, perfectly round circle of pale, puckered skin. It was old. I didn't know what to say. He let the sweater fall back into place. Don't ask about things you aren't ready to hear the answers to. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't an evasion. It was a simple, hard boundary. He had drawn his line. Now, I drew mine. I looked down at the tiny microphone, still sitting on the table. "My mother was a seamstress," I said, my voice quiet but clear. The rattling in my chest was starting to subside. She had a little shop on Prairie Steps. She made wedding dresses from scratch. She could look at a woman and know exactly what would make her feel beautiful. He turned from the window, listening. His attention was absolute. "She lost the shop, debt, some holding company, just like my eviction notice. Different name, same story. They took everything, the machines, the bolts of silk, the lease. They took it all." I pulled the blanket tighter. The only thing they couldn't foreclose on was her laugh. She'd sit in our tiny, cold apartment holding an eviction notice, and she'd make a joke about the landlord's bad suit. It was our weapon. It was the only thing we had left. I finally looked up at him. "It's the only thing I have left, and those people, they just tried to take it too." He didn't speak, just watched me, the storm raging in the glass behind him. The silence in the glass house stretched, filled only by the roar of the rain. He moved from the window and sat in the low, modern armchair opposite the sofa where I sat. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. His hand rested on the arm of the chair. My hand was fisted in the blanket on the cushion, just inches away. I could feel the heat coming off his skin, a proximity that was more charged than a touch. My heart, which had been hammering with fear, gave a different kind of jolt. A crack of thunder, so loud it shook the foundation of the house, split the air. The lights in the ceiling buzzed, flickered, and died. The glass house went black. It was an absolute suffocating darkness, broken only by the blue-white, silent flashes of lightning that lit the room like a strobe, freezing us in stark, terrifying snapshots. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. Emilio didn't make a sound. In the next flash of lightning, he was gone from the chair. I heard a faint click of a cabinet, then the sharp, sulphurous smell of a match. A small flame flared in the center of the room. Emilio. He lit a thick, white candle on the coffee table, then another and another. He moved with an unhurried grace, as if he preferred the room this way. In moments, the space was filled with the soft, flickering glow of a dozen candles. The effect was hypnotic. The glass walls, which had been windows to the storm, now became mirrors. Dark, endless mirrors. Everywhere I looked, I saw our reflections, two figures in a small pool of light, repeated over and over into an infinite, shadowy distance. Emilio stood by the wall of glass, looking out. The rain had softened, but it still ran down the panes in silver, wavering lines, like a curtain. "I need one moment," he said, his voice a low rumble, almost lost in the storm. "Just one. Without battle lines. Without this." He gestured vaguely to the chip on the table, to the storm outside, to the war he lived in. He was asking for a truce. I stood up, pulling the blanket around me like a shield. I walked to the window, stopping beside him. We stood in silence, shoulder to shoulder, watching the water trace paths down the glass. Our reflections watched us back. I don't know what possessed me. Maybe it was the candlelight. Maybe it was the shared vulnerability. Maybe it was the need to prove, to myself, that I wasn't just a victim he had to save. I lifted my hand from the blanket, slowly. I pressed it flat against his chest, right over his heart. The cashmere was soft, but beneath it, his body was tense, solid. He was a wall of controlled energy, and under my palm, his heartbeat, it wasn't fast. It was a slow, deep, powerful thump, 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 the steadiest thing in the room. He didn't move. He didn't breathe. His eyes, dark in the candlelight, dropped from the window to my face. I leaned in. I rose on my toes, my eyes on his. I was giving him every second to stop me, to turn his head, to push me away. He didn't. My lips touched his. It wasn't a spark. It was a connection. It was hesitant, warm, and tasted faintly of the rain and the clean, sharp scent I remembered from the alley. It was a question. For a heartbeat, he remained perfectly still. Then I felt it, a small, sharp intake of breath. His hand, which had been hanging at his side, came up. It didn't grab me. It settled on my waist. His fingers splayed wide against the wool blanket, his thumb resting on the bare skin just above my hip. It was a touch that wasn't a caress. It was an anchor. It was his question, back to me. I whispered the answer against his lips. Yes. His hand tightened. It wasn't rough, but it was definite, decisive. He pulled me in, erasing the last inch of space between us. His other hand came up, not to my hair, but to my jaw. His thumb brushing against my cheekbone, his fingers gentle but firm. He kissed me back. And this kiss was not hesitant. It was deep. It was searching. It was all the tension of the last 2 days, all the unspoken fear, all the cold, all the adrenaline. It was a drowning man finally taking a breath. He took a step, and I took one back, until my shoulders hit the cold, unyielding glass wall. I gasped at the sudden, biting cold. It seeped through the blanket, a stark contrast to the fire of his body pressing against mine. His lips left mine, moving to my jaw, his breath hot against my skin. I tilted my head back, my eyes closing, my fingers clenching the front of his sweater. A shiver ran through me, starting in my toes and ending at the roots of my hair. It had nothing to do with the cold. His breathing was rougher now, a low sound in his chest that vibrated against my hand. He held me there, pinned between the storm and himself. He didn't try to move his hands. He didn't try to push for more. He just held me. He pulled back, just enough to look at me. His forehead pressed against mine. Our breaths mingled, a small white cloud in the candle-lit air. His eyes, which I had only ever seen as cold and hard as the sea, were now dark, soft, and completely, terrifyingly, focused on mine. The candlelight danced in them. We stayed like that, suspended in the moment, the storm raging outside, our reflections watching us from every angle. The thunder faded, rolling away into the hills. The rain softened, quieting from a roar to a soft, rhythmic drumming. He let out a long, slow breath. The tension in his shoulders seemed to uncoil. He eased his grip on my waist, though he didn't let go. His hand moved from my jaw, his fingers gently smoothing my hair, tucking a loose strand behind my ear. He stepped back, and the loss of his warmth made me shiver again. He turned, picked up his own dark suit jacket from the back of the chair, the one from the car, and draped it over my shoulders. On top of the blanket, it was an act of pure, simple care that undid me more than the kiss. He leaned in, and I thought he would kiss me again. Instead, his lips pressed against my forehead, a gentle, sealing pressure. "You're still free," he whispered, his voice rough, "to joke about me tomorrow morning." A small, watery laugh escaped me. It felt rusty, like I hadn't used it in years. "Good," I whispered back, pulling his jacket tighter. It smelled like him, leather and lightning. "Because I'll have even more material now." The silence that settled in the glass house was different. It wasn't empty. It wasn't tense. The rain had almost stopped, leaving only the sound of water dripping from the eaves onto the stone patio outside. Drip, drip, drip. It sounded like applause, a quiet, hesitant applause for a truce that felt impossibly fragile. I woke up to sunlight. It felt wrong. After the storm and the candlelight, waking up in a strange, sterile bedroom in the glass house felt like emerging from a dream. The blanket and his jacket were folded neatly on a chair. I was alone. When I came out, he was waiting, not with coffee, but with a plan. The truce was over, the battle lines were back. "They think you're my property," he said, handing me a plain baseball cap. "Today, I'm going to show them what my property looks like." It wasn't a tour, it was a statement. We didn't take the blacked-out SUV. We took a vintage, impeccably restored sedan. We drove in the bright, unforgiving light of day. First, the Artemis oven. It was a bakery in the heart of Dockline, but it was spotless. The air smelled of warm bread and cardamom. The old woman behind the counter, Mrs. Artemis, didn't bow. She just nodded at Emilio. "He's thin," she said, looking at him. Then she looked at me. "She's thinner. Eat." She thrust a bag of warm bread into my hands. "Thank you, Maria," Emilio said. "Don't thank me," she huffed. "Just fix the streetlights on Ash. My girls are walking home in the dark." "It's being handled," he said. "See that it is." He wasn't a boss. He was a custodian. Next, De Laurentiis Customs. It looked like a high-end garage for restoring classic cars. Men in clean gray uniforms moved with quiet efficiency. There wasn't a speck of grease on the floor. "This is the face," he said, gesturing. "It's clean." "And the not clean," I asked. "Exists to protect the clean," he said simply. We went to the Moonweaver Bridge Cooperative, a farmer's market he apparently sponsored. Then, last, he took me to a place that wasn't on any map, the Lantern Workshop. It was a converted warehouse, but inside, it was a high-tech vocational school. Teenagers, kids who looked like they should have been on the street corners, were learning to code, to weld, to design. Emilio walked straight to the main office. A young man looked up, saw him, and immediately stood. Emilio placed a thick envelope on the desk. "This covers the next quarter for all of them," Emilio said. No smile, no small talk. "Thank you, Mr. D," the young man said. "Don't thank me. Just make sure they pass." We walked out. I watched the kids through the window, hunched over their computers, focused. This was his restoration fund, a real one. We were almost to the car when Ivo Wren materialized, stepping out from between two buildings. He fell into step beside Emilio. "The intel from the warehouse was good," Ivo said, his voice a low monotone. "It's worse than we thought. Arroyo hasn't just bought a few CIB officers. They've bought a full half of the entire bureau. They're running the new advisory fund." Emilio stopped, his back to me. "Who?" "Kellen Bryce is at the top of the list," Ivo said. He's not just taking cash, he's directing their seizures through the HFCO. The CIB, the HFCO, the Arroyos. It wasn't 3 snakes, it was one, eating its own tail, with Kellen Bryce as the head. I finally understood. I had joked that Emilio was a criminal. The truth was, he was the only thing standing between the city and the abyss. The CIB was the law, the Arroyos were chaos, but Emilio, he was the border. He was the jungle law, yes, but a jungle has rules. These other people, the ones in suits and uniforms, they hated rules more than anyone. We drove back to the glass house in a new kind of silence. The intimacy of the night before felt 1,000 miles away. He was gone, back inside his own head, calculating. We sat in the car for a moment, the engine ticking as it cooled. "You need rules." "No," he said, not looking at me. "Rules for this, for staying alive." He turned, his face all business. "Rule 1, from now on, you have no fixed schedule. You don't go to the coffee truck. You don't go to the Blue Lamp. You never go to the same place twice." I nodded. "Rule 2, you never react on emotion." He tapped his temple. "Bryce, the Arroyos, they feed on it. They want you angry. They want you scared. That's how they control you. You feel it, you lock it down, you use it later." And rule 3, you never, ever stand near an open doorway, not a car door, not a restaurant, not a lobby. You're a target. You stay in the center of a room or against a solid wall. You never make yourself easy to grab. No schedules, no emotion, no doorways. It was the comedian's code, inverted. My life was all about timing, all about emotion, all about standing on the edge of the stage. He was teaching me how to be a ghost. "That's a lot of rules," I said, my voice quiet. "You have rules for everything, don't you? What about your heart? You got rules for that, too." The question hung in the air. I expected him to ignore it, to dismiss it. He held my gaze. "Yeah, 1. He didn't blink. "Never force anyone to stay." My breath hitched. It was about last night. It was about right now. He was drawing a new line, not on a map, but between us. He was giving me the key to my own cage, and in doing so, he was making it impossible for me to leave. "One more stop," he said, starting the car. "You found their ledger. I think I know where they're spending the money." The Echo Gallery was downtown, in one of those new glass and steel canyons. It smelled of wet paint, damp wood, and old money. It was sterile. I hated it. "Why are we here?" I whispered, as we walked past pretentious sculptures. "The Arroyos are trash," he said, his voice low. "But Lysandra Cole, the woman who runs their money, she loves art. She thinks it makes her clean." We moved into a private viewing room in the back. The walls were covered in dark, abstract paintings. "They're washing the money through art," he said. "It's more than that," I said, stepping closer to a large canvas of dark blue and black, my comedian's eye, the one trained to spot the detail that's wrong, snagged on something, in the bottom right corner, where the artist's signature should be. There was a small, gold leaf stamp. "Emilio," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Look!" It was a small, 3-letter code, followed by a series of numbers, HFCO, the same prefix from the ledger in Finch's office. "They're not just damaging sneakers and TVs," I said, the pieces clicking together. "They're seizing valuable art at the docks. Finch marks it as damaged in the ledger. The restoration fund pays out the insurance claim, and then Lysandra Cole, she rescues the art and sells it here for clean cash. They're double dipping." My phone buzzed in my pocket, a new number, but I knew it was Juno. "Gala, tonight, Aurora Hall, the East Coast Restoration Fund. They're celebrating their first year of success. My source says Cole, Bryce, and the whole Arroyo leadership will be there. It's a Shark Tank. T. If you ever wanted to flip the table, this is it." I showed him the text. His whole body went still. He stared at the phone. I saw the muscle in his jaw tighten. His hand instinctively went to his left shoulder, his fingers pressing against the spot where I knew the scar was. He was hesitating. This was not his plan. This was messy. This was reactive. "Emilio," I said, You're trying to win a war in the shadows, but they're not in the shadows. They're on a red carpet. They're using a charity gala to celebrate robbing my mother." He looked at me, his eyes dark with conflict. "Comedy needs an audience," I pressed, my voice shaking but firm. "So does the truth. We can't let them do this. We have to be there." He looked at the HFCO stamp on the painting. He looked at the text. He looked at me. "North Crescent parking lot," he said to Evo, who I hadn't even heard enter the room. 9 p.m., full exit protocol. He looked at me. "You will not be Talia Quill tonight. You will be a shadow. You will do exactly as I say. Understood." Understood. They didn't take me shopping. They took me to a tailor, an old man in a basement shop who didn't ask questions. In 1 hour, I was in a simple, perfectly fitted black dress. It was elegant and utterly forgettable. My hair was pulled back. I was given a single earpiece, no bigger than a pearl. "A comms unit," Evo explained. "You will hear us. We will hear you. Do not speak into it unless it is an emergency." He then handed me 3 small laminated cards. On each was a joke. Why don't bankers tell secrets they have no interest? My landlord is so cheap. He's charging me for emotional damages to the carpet. I asked the CIB for the time. They said for a price. "Your refrain," Evo said. "If you are in position, you say nothing. If you are compromised or need extraction, you work one of these into the conversation. We will pull you, no matter what." I looked at the cards, my weapons. I was ready. I walked into the main room of the glass house. Emilio was there, waiting. Now in a flawless dark tuxedo. He looked like he belonged on a movie poster. He watched me walk toward him. His eyes, they weren't soft, like last night. They were sharp. He wasn't looking at me like a man looks at a woman. He was looking at me like an archer looks at his arrow, a weapon he had just crafted, a smiling arrow. He held the door for me. "One last ruling," he said as I passed him. "I'm running out of room in my head. Emilio, this one is the most important. Tonight, you are my guest. You stay by my side. But if I say the words curtain fall," he met my eyes. His were deadly serious. "You walk. You don't ask why. You don't look for me. You find Evo, or you get to the North Crescent lot on your own. You do not look back. Promise me." "I promise," I said. "Good," he said, opening the car door. "Let's go see the show." The Aurora Hall was a cathedral built on lies. It rose out of the downtown smog like a shard of glass, all glittering lights and sharp angles. This was where the city's elite came to wash their guilt, and tonight, they were using the East Coast Restoration Fund to do it. My mother's stolen rent, magnified 1,000,000 times, was paying for the champagne. "Stay close," Emilio murmured as we stepped out of the sedan. He wasn't talking to me. He was talking to the air. A half-dozen of his men, all in sharp suits, melted into the crowd, becoming invisible. I was invisible, too. The black dress was a shadow. The single pearl earpiece was my leash. Emilio, in his perfect tuxedo, was the main event. He smiled, a thin, tight expression. As cameras flashed, he was playing the part of the businessman, the philanthropist. The man worse than a criminal was here to blend in. We walked into the grand ballroom. It was breathtaking. A ceiling painted like the sky, chandeliers like frozen waterfalls, and on the stage, under a banner that read, "Restoring Our Coast, Restoring Our Justice," was Lysandra Cole. She was beautiful, in a cold, reptilian way. Her white dress shimmered. She was talking about community partnerships and transparent accountability. I felt a sudden, hot urge to run onto the stage and ask her about the HFCO ledger. Rule 2, no emotion, lock it down, use it later. I locked it down. Emilio was a phantom. He handed me a glass of champagne. "Drink it, it looks normal," and then he was gone, moving into the crowd, shaking hands with a city councilman, nodding at a judge, when he was a shark, swimming with other sharks. I stood alone, testing my rules. I found a spot against a solid marble pillar, away from the exits, and I watched. That's when he found me. Talia Quill, the breakout star of the Blue Lamp. I didn't need to turn. I could smell the stale coffee and cheap ambition. Inspector Kellen Bryce. He sidled up, his potato face slick with sweat, his eyes doing that restless insect-like crawl over my dress. "I'm surprised to see you here," I said, my voice flat. "Oh, I'm a big supporter of the arts." He smiled. "Especially performance art. That's what you do. Right, you perform." "I tell jokes," I said. Right. He leaned in, his voice dropping. "You know, that laugh spout thing that was just a clumsy first attempt by amateurs." He gestured around the room. "These people, they make real stars. A CIB-sponsored public access show. Maybe a comedian's guide to the city. We could work on a script, one with the right ending." He was offering me the deal again. Betray Emilio, and I'd get my dream. My stomach turned. He was threatening me and bribing me in the same breath. This wasn't the time for Evo's safe jokes. This was the time for a punchline. I gave him a bright, empty smile. "Does your script have a good ending, Inspector, or just a big bonus?" The small crowd around us, 2 women in jewels and a man with a political pin, let out a sharp, collective laugh. They thought I was being witty, a comedian at work. Bryce's face went stiff. The smile snapped off. He knew exactly what I'd said. Before he could respond, Emilio was suddenly there. He didn't even look at Bryce. Put his hand on the small of my back, a firm, possessive pressure. "Councilman," Emilio said to the man with the pin, "I need your opinion on the new zoning proposal." He steered me away, his hand never leaving my back. As we moved through the crowd, the pressure of his hand changed. It wasn't a caress, it was a signal. Tap, 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 a short, rhythmic pressure. "We are being watched." I scanned the room. Lysandra Cole was still on stage. Bryce was fuming. And then I saw him, near the catering entrance, wearing a badly fitting security uniform. Marlo Finch, the warehouse manager. He was staring right at me. My phone vibrated in the tiny purse they'd given me. I angled myself away, checking the screen. A text from Juno. "T, they're on the move. Main server sync is happening now. They're backing up the gala's donor list to the main ECRF servers. The firewall is down for the transfer. My source says you have a 4-minute window. Now or never." 4 minutes? I looked at Finch. He was talking into a radio, pointing at me. I looked at Bryce, who was now talking to Finch, his face dark. Emilio leaned in, his lips brushing my ear. "They've made you... We're leaving." "No," I whispered. "We can't." I showed him the phone. 4 minutes. Juno says the server is open. It's the only chance to get the link. The real link between the fund and the CIB. His eyes scanned the text. The muscle in his jaw jumped. He was calculating. "The server room is in the back, near where Finch is." "I know." "It's a trap." "It's an opportunity," I countered. "They're expecting you to run. They're not expecting me to take the stage." He looked at me, a new, sharp assessment in his eyes. "Comedy needs an audience," and I whispered, repeating my words from the gallery. He nodded. "Once. Give your tech the signal. You have 90 seconds, no more." He melted back into the crowd. I walked straight toward the stage. Lysandra Cole was finishing her speech, asking for donations. "We have pledge cards, or if someone feels moved to speak." I raised my hand. Her eyes found me. "Yes, a donation." "A story." I said. I walked up the small steps, taking the microphone from her cold, surprised hand. The room was silent, 1,000 pairs of eyes, all on me. "Hi," I said, my voice echoing in the vast hall. "My name is Talia Quill. I live in Dockline. You're all here restoring the coast, which is great. I'd just like to restore my apartment. My landlord, East Row Holdings, just raised my rent by 120%. A nervous titter ran through the crowd. They thought this was part of the show. "I know. Right," I said, feeding on the energy. I told him, 120% for that price. Does the apartment come with a new life? He didn't laugh. In my earpiece, I heard Evo's voice, calm and low. "Tech team is at the server room door. Keep them laughing." I looked out at the sea of diamonds and tuxedos. I saw Kellen Bryce, his face purple. pushing his way toward the stage. But it's all about perspective. I continued, my voice getting stronger. I have this friend. He works in shipping. He told me the weirdest thing. He said it's easier to list a masterpiece painting as damaged goods than it is to get a pothole filled on my street. The room was dead silent now. This wasn't funny, this was an accusation. I saw Finch, at the back, pointing at me, yelling at 2 uniformed CIB officers. "Tech is in," Evo's voice said, 30 seconds. Bryce was at the foot of the stage, his hand on his hip. "Ma'am, you need to—" "I'm almost done, Inspector," I said, smiling at him. "Or do you have a script for me to read? I hear you're great with endings." The crowd gasped. 10 seconds, Evo said. "So I just want to thank the East Coast Restoration Fund," I said, my voice ringing with false sincerity, "for showing all of us in Dockline exactly how much our restoration truly costs." "We're in," Evo said. "Data is flowing. Get out." I put the mic back on the stand. "Ladies and gentlemen," Kellen Bryce's voice suddenly boomed over the entire PA system. He was at the main controls. "We have a minor technical issue with the fire suppression system. Please remain calm. For your safety, the hall is in a temporary lockdown. The doors will be sealed for just a moment." The heavy oak doors of the ballroom thudded shut. A lock clicked. A trap. It wasn't arresting me. It was caging me. Caging us. The crowd started to murmur, panic rising. Emilio was at my side. He'd come from nowhere. He didn't look at me. He just grabbed my hand, his grip like steel. "Curtain fall," he whispered. "My promise." I didn't look back. He let go of my hand and vanished into the panicking crowd. I didn't see where he went. I didn't have time. Evo was at my elbow. "This way, rule 3. He wasn't moving toward the locked doors. He was moving toward the stage. He shoved me behind a heavy velvet curtain into the darkness of the backstage area. "Where are we going?" I panted. "Gray space," he said. He kicked open a metal panel marked electrical and shoved me into a dark, narrow service corridor. We ran. "He's diverting them. The freight elevator is 30 feet ahead." We burst through a door into a concrete loading bay. The elevator was open, waiting. "Hold it." 2 men, not CIB, not in uniforms. They were Arroyo, hard-faced, in cheap suits, and they were blocking the elevator. Evo didn't break stride. He shoved me behind him. "Get in the elevator. Hit the button." He moved. It was like the alley. It was fast, brutal, and efficient. He took the first man's arm, using his momentum to slam him into the wall, an elbow to the throat. The man went down. The second man saw me fumbling for the button and lunged. He was big. He grabbed my arm. "No!" I yelled. I saw it. Next to the door, a stack of leftover party supplies from the gala. A half dozen, 3-foot-long promotional confetti cannons. I grabbed one. It was heavy. I didn't hit him. I aimed it straight at his face, just like I'd seen on the instructions, and twisted the base. There was a loud whoomp. A massive cloud of silver and gold mylar streamers exploded in his face. He screamed, stumbling back, his hands flying to his eyes, which were now full of glittering paper. Evo didn't hesitate. A single, precise chop to the man's neck. He collapsed. "In?" Evo growled. I scrambled into the elevator. Evo hit the button for the sub-level parking garage. The doors started to close. That's when Emilio appeared. He was running. He dove through the closing doors, tumbling into the elevator just as they sealed. "They've sealed the garage exits," he said, straightening his tuxedo. He wasn't even breathing hard. "Then how—" "The North Crescent lot," he said. "It's 2 blocks away. We're not going out the vehicle ramp. We're going out the ventilation shaft." The elevator stopped. The doors opened onto a dark, concrete garage. "This way, stay low." We ran past rows of luxury cars. We rounded a concrete pillar, and they were there. A CIB car parked sideways, blocking the path to the ventilation access. But the men who stepped out weren't CIB. It was a full Arroyo team, 4 of them, and they had hardware. "Get back," Emilio roared. He grabbed the front of my dress and threw me, bodily, behind a massive concrete support column. A sound like a string of firecrackers echoed in the garage. Crack, crack, crack. I screamed as the windshield of a nearby Mercedes exploded, showering us in tiny glass cubes. Emilio was in front of me, shielding me with his own body. He grunted a sharp, pained sound. "Emilio?" The shooting stopped. I heard Ivo's voice, a sharp command. "SUV now." Emilio grabbed my hand. "Run!" We sprinted. The black SUV was there, 20 feet away, the engine roaring, the back door open. Ivo was already in the driver's seat. We dove in. The tires screamed. "They're not following," Ivo said, his eyes on the mirror as we tore up the ramp to the street. "They don't have to," Emilio said, his voice strained. "The CIB are on their way. They gave the Arroyos a 5-minute window to clean up the mess." The sirens. I could hear them now, but they were distant. They weren't coming for us. I looked at Emilio. He was leaning his head back against the seat, his eyes closed. "You're hurt," I said. "It's a scratch." I looked at his arm. The left arm, the sleeve of his perfect, custom tuxedo was torn, a long, dark rip, like a cat's claw. It was dark, but not black. It was a deep, wet red. A bullet had grazed him, the bullet that had been meant for me. The car sped through the night. In the front passenger seat, a tech I'd never seen before, who must have been with Ivo, snapped a laptop shut. "Got it, sir," the tech said. "The full download was successful. We have everything, the ledgers, the transfer codes, the art manifests, the direct link from the HFCO through the fund, straight to Bryce's offshore accounts. It's all here, clear as a bell." I looked at Emilio. He was still holding the silk handkerchief to his arm, but his eyes were open, watching me. I was shaking, but it wasn't fear. It was rage, and it was choice. I reached across the seat. My hand was trembling, but I didn't care. I didn't touch his arm. I didn't try to comfort him. I took his free hand. He looked down at our joined hands. His was warm, steady. Mine was cold. He didn't pull away. He didn't squeeze. He just let me hold it. It wasn't a plea for protection. It was a statement. I was here. I was in this. The SUV hit the highway, merging into the anonymous, late-night traffic. Emilio finally spoke, his voice low and tired. "The data will be in Juno's hands in 5 minutes. It'll be on every news feed by sunrise. Lysandra is finished, the fund is finished, and Bryce is exposed." He turned his head, his dark eyes finding mine in the shadows of the car. "Now they'll come for you, not as bait, as the source." The victory was hollow. We didn't go back to the glass house. We went to another safe house, a sterile, high-tech apartment on the 42nd floor of a building that didn't seem to have a name. It overlooked the whole of Graybridge, a glittering carpet of lights that felt 1,000,000 miles away. My hand was still throbbing from the memory of holding his. His arm was bandaged, a clean white slash of cotton against the dark fabric of his shirt. We had won. The television was on, the sound muted. The data Juno had leaked from the gala was a wildfire. My face was plastered next to Kellen Bryce's. Gala of Thieves, ECRF exposed. CIB inspector implicated in Arroyo syndicate laundering scheme. I should have felt triumphant. I felt empty. Emilio stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, his back to me, a phone pressed to his ear. He was speaking in low, clipped tones, watching the sun begin to stain the edges of the city. He was a general, surveying the battlefield he had just set on fire. His other phone, the one on the table, buzzed. A text. He ended his call and looked at it. I saw the change. It wasn't a flinch. It was a freezing, a sudden, terrible stillness that was more violent than any movement. "Emilio, what is it? Is it Juno?" He turned. His face was a mask, but his eyes were black with a cold fury I hadn't seen before. "Ivo is on his way. You will not leave this room." "What happened?" My blood felt like ice water. He looked at me, and I could see the conflict. He was deciding what to tell me. "It's your coffee truck," he said finally, his voice flat. "The caffeine caravan. A stupid question. What about it?" "It's been damaged." "Damaged how?" I was already on my feet. "Emilio, Damaged is a word you use for freight. What happened? Arson, he said. The word was a stone. They were there. They heard her. Talia. Her Mrs. Greer, my voice cracked. Is she? She's alive, he said quickly, cutting off my panic. She's at St. Jude's, a broken arm, some contusions. She'll be okay. I have to go. I wasn't asking. I was grabbing my shoes, the simple black heels from the gala. I have to see her. This is my fault. Oh God, this is my fault. I ran for the door. He was there before I touched the handle, a wall of black cashmere. He didn't grab me. He just put his hands on my shoulders. His grip was a cage of iron. No. Wait, get out of my way, I said, shoving at his chest. It was like pushing granite. She's my friend. She has nothing to do with you. And that's why you cannot go, he said. His voice hard, but not unkind. He gave me a small, firm shake. The hospital is crawling with CIB. They aren't there to take a report. They are there waiting for you. You walk in that door. You confirm her connection to you. You make her a target for the rest of her life. So I do nothing, I screamed, tears of pure, hot rage finally spilling over. I just sit here in your sky prison while they hurt my friends. Let me, he said. It was the same thing he'd said about my eviction, but now it sounded different, colder. I will handle it. I will have my people move her to a private facility. I will pay for everything. I will post guards. I will make sure she is safe. But you cannot be seen. I stopped fighting, the sobs choking me. He was right. My touch was poison. I okay? I whispered. He was right. He let go of me, his hands lingering for a second, as if he didn't quite know how to comfort me. He didn't. He just knew how to command. Evo will be at the door. Do not open it for anyone else. He left. The lock clicked shut, a heavy, electronic sound. I was alone. I was alone for 2 hours, pacing the apartment, staring at the city that now hated me. I was a pariah, a fraud, what had Bryce called me, a performance artist. His phone was still on the table. It lit up. A new message. It wasn't from Evo. It was a link from an unknown number. My fingers trembled. I clicked it. It was a video, not a news report. It was a compilation. Grainy footage. Me at the blue lamp, pointing. Betty's a criminal. Cut. The alley. Me, struggling with the scooter. The dock rats shoving me. Cut. The black SUV. Emilio. Stepping out. Him. Shielding me with his body. Me, getting into his car. Cut. The gala. A long lens shot I hadn't known was being taken. Emilio. His hand on the small of my back. Guiding me. Me, looking up at him. Just before I went on stage. The title was plastered in ugly red letters, Comedian Exposes City Corruption from Her Mob Boss Boyfriend's Script. They were discrediting me. They were painting me as a liar, a prop, a mob girlfriend. They were taking my one true moment, my one act of courage at the gala, and turning it into a filthy, calculated lie. They were taking my jokes, my voice. The lock on the door clicked. I whirled, ready to scream at Evo or Emilio. It was Juno. She looked worse than I did. Her face was a wreck, pale and blotchy. Her eyes red-rimmed and hollow. Juno. Thank God. I rushed forward. Did you see it? The video. They're saying I'm his? Talia, she whispered, her voice breaking. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She was clutching her laptop. Juno, what's wrong? You're shaking. I have to tell you something, she stammered, sinking into a chair. What is it? The laugh spout link, she whispered. The one with the spyware. The microphone chip. What about it? I said, my stomach tightening. Emilio found it. It was Arroyo. It was Cole. Yes, she said. And then she looked up at me, her face crumbling. But I'm the one who sent it to you. The air left my lungs. The room went silent. What? I said. It was just a sound. It didn't mean anything. Lysandra Cole, she said, the words spilling out in a desperate, hiccuping rush. She approached me 2 months ago. Before all of this, she knew I was struggling. She said she was a fan of my blog. She said she could get me access, a real press pass, a chance to break a real story. Juno, no. She said she was just trying to measure the buzz on new talent. She gave me the link. She said it was just a tracker to see who you shared it with, to measure your virality. I thought it was just ratings. T, I swear to God, I thought I was helping you get noticed. I didn't know it was a mic. I didn't know it was her. I didn't know it was them. She was sobbing, her head in her hands. I was jealous. Talia, you were on stage, and you were so brave, and I was just digging for scraps. I wanted a win, and she gave me one. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I backed away. I felt my back hit the cold glass of the window. My best friend. My only friend. The one who knew about my mother. The one who knew about my debt. The CIB harassing me. The eviction notice. The warehouse. Finch knowing who I was. The microphone that broadcast my hiding spot. Mrs. Greer. It wasn't just Emilio. It all traced back to her. To this. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just shattered. The person I was 10 seconds ago broke into 1,000 pieces. The lock clicked again. Emilio was back. He stepped inside and took in the scene in one sweeping glance. Juno, hysterical. Me, a ghost against the glass. Get up, he said. His voice was flat. He was talking to Juno. Emilio, I was explaining, she sobbed. I heard enough, he said. You're a traitor. I didn't know, she cried, scrambling to her feet. I swear. It doesn't matter, he said, walking to the desk. You sold her out for a story. Now, you're going to fix it. He took her laptop from her shaking hands. They're discrediting her. They're using the intel you gave them to paint her as a liar. He opened the laptop. So you're going to leak the rest, everything, the full, unedited data from the server, the CIB payroll, the wire transfer receipts, the offshore accounts, the art manifests. He looked at her, his eyes like ice. Not just to the news, to your blog, to the Graybridge Citizen Channel, to every gossip site. Burn them to the ground, right now. Juno stared at him, her face white with terror. They'll kill me. I'll protect you, he said, his voice void of any comfort. But you will do this, or you will walk out that door alone. Your choice. Juno looked at me, her eyes a desperate, pleading, broken mess. I turned away. I walked into the bedroom and closed the door, shutting out her sobs. I heard her start to type. I slid down the bedroom wall until I was sitting on the floor. I felt hollowed out. Carved? I was a thing, a tool, a weapon, a liability. The door was closed, but I knew he was out there. He didn't come in. He didn't knock. He didn't offer a blanket or a kind word. He just stood guard. He protected the perimeter. He gave me the one thing he could space to break. I don't know how long I sat there. An hour? 2? The sounds of desperate typing finally stopped. Then I heard new voices, angry, low. I crept to the door and opened it a crack. Evo was there, by the door, and another man, younger, in a suit that was too expensive and too loud, Nico Drager. One of Emilio's lieutenants. He was pacing, his face red. Is insane. Emilio, you blew up the entire waterfront for her. Emilio was sitting in a chair, his bandaged arm resting on the table. He looked exhausted. It was a cancer. Nico, I cut it out. You cut out our line, Nico spat. The HFCO, the CIB, they were our partners, ugly partners. Yeah, but they kept the peace. Now the Arroyos are screaming for blood. The whole port is on fire. The cops are tearing Dockline apart, and all of it for a comedian. She has a name, Emilio said, his voice lethally quiet. I don't care what her name is. She's a liability. The Arroyos want one thing to make this stop. One thing they want her. My heart stopped beating. Just trade her, Nico pleaded, his voice dropping. A clean trade. Her for the waterfront. It's simple business. It's the smart play. Emilio was silent for a long, terrible moment. He just stared at Nico. I couldn't breathe. Get out, Nico, Emilio said. What, Emilio? Be reasonable. This is... Get out. You're choosing her A, civilian over the family over the business. Emilio stood up, slowly, and he was a head taller than Nico. The business is the family. The family is the border. You want to give them a piece of us, you want to let them cross the line and take what's mine. Just for a quiet life, that's not business, that's surrender. She's not us, Nico yelled. She's a girl you met 3 nights ago. She is under my protection, which is more than I can say for you. Emilio looked at Ivo. Nico, your territory in the South Ward is suspended. Your port access is revoked, effective immediately. Nico's face went from red to white. You can't. You're starting a war. Emilio, a war inside our own house for her. The war already started, Emilio said. I'm just choosing my side. Now leave. Nico stared at him, then at me in the doorway. His look was pure venom. He stormed out, slamming the door. The silence that was left was heavier than the one before. I stepped out of the bedroom. Emilio was standing at the window, his back to me. He had just fractured his own organization. He had just started a civil war. For me. You're losing everything, I whispered. My voice was hoarse. Your business, your people, they're going to tear you apart. All for me. He turned, his face carved from shadow. They froze your money. They tried to take your home. They put a mic on your phone. They put your friend in the hospital. They're trying to destroy your name, and they want me to give you to them. He walked toward me, his eyes burning with an intensity that had nothing to do with the night before. This was not passion, it was possession. This isn't about you, Talia, not anymore. This is about them. They think they can cross any line, take anything, hurt anyone. He stopped, standing so close I could feel the heat rolling off him. I'm not losing anything, he said, his voice a low growl. I'm taking back what's mine. I'm taking back the borders. We stood there, less than a foot apart, but we were on different planets. The air was thick, suffocating. He was trapped in his war, and I was his prisoner. We were in the same room, but we had never been further apart. He left me alone again. He had to. He had to go and put out the fires Nico was starting. I was alone in the sky prison. Juno was gone, taken by Ivo to some other deeper hole to finish the data leak. I was the prize, the liability, the flashpoint. Nico was right. This was all because of me. Emilio wouldn't surrender, and the Arroyos wouldn't stop. They'd keep coming. They'd hurt more people. Mrs. Greer. They'd keep pushing until they broke his organization, or until they got me. He was trying to protect me, but I had become the excuse for all the violence. I was the border. I looked at the note he'd written in the book of jokes. Don't sell your smile cheaply. I looked at his rule for his heart. Never force anyone to stay. I grabbed a piece of the apartment stationery. My hand was shaking. You're right. This isn't about me. Don't let me be the excuse for the violence. You protect your borders. I'm going to go protect mine. I left the note on the table. I didn't take anything. I left the black dress. I left the pearl earpiece. I walked out wearing the same jeans and t-shirt I'd worn to the warehouse. I grabbed the one thing from my old purse that was still mine, my small, dented, silver handheld microphone, my weapon. I opened the apartment door. Ivo was gone. Emilio had pulled all his security to deal with the war with Nico. I walked out into the hallway. I didn't look back. I was terrified. But for the first time, I wasn't his arrow, I was my own. Walking out of that high-rise was the longest walk of my life. I was a ghost. My face was on every news feed, a mob girlfriend and a liar. My bank account was frozen. My apartment was lost. My best friend was a traitor, and my protector was the cause of a war. I had nothing left but a microphone and the 3 rules he'd given me. Rule 1, no fixed schedule. I couldn't go home. I couldn't go to Mrs. Greer's. I had to disappear. Rule 2, no emotion. I couldn't look scared. I couldn't look lost. Rule 3, no doorway. I walked from the glittering high-rise, keeping to the center of the sidewalk. I didn't hail a cab. I just walked, my head high, my pace even. like I had somewhere to be. I was terrified. I was a target for the CIB, the Arroyos, and now, probably Nico Drager's angry crew. But I looked, I hoped, like a girl who was just annoyed by the morning traffic. I walked for 2 hours, all the way to the campus of Graybridge Community Arts. I knew a kid in the visual arts department, Sketch, who owed me $20. I found him in the 24-hour sculpture studio. "Talia," he said, his eyes wide. "Dude, you're like, on TV." "I need a favor. Sketch, I need a corner, and your silence." He let me crash on a pile of dusty drop cloths in the back of the studio. It smelled like turpentine and clay. It was the safest I'd felt in days. For 48 hours, I was a ghost. I used the art students' showers. I ate vending machine crackers, and I listened. The data leak Juno had pushed was having an effect. The city was screaming. Kellen Bryce was temporarily suspended. The East Coast Restoration Fund was being audited. But the narrative about me was sticking. The tainted witness. The comedian's deceit. They had poisoned my voice. So I took it back. I bought a cheap pay-as-you-go burner phone with the $20 Sketch owed me. I created a new, anonymous livestream account. I didn't use my name. I didn't show my face. I just put my silver microphone in front of the phone's camera, a stark, silent image. I called the channel The Laughing Dumbbell. My first broadcast was just audio. "Good evening. Graybridge. This is a story about a man who owned a border, and a man who owned the law, and a man who owned, well, pretty much everything else." I told them fables. I told them about the Sharks' Charity, which fed on the homes of the poor. I told them about the harbor master who listed priceless paintings as damaged goods. I told them about shadow landlords who evicted tenants with invisible ink. I never used a single name. I just told the jokes. My voice was rough, quiet, coming from a dark room that smelled like clay. 10 people watched the first night. The second night, it was 50. By the end of the week, I had 500. They were residents of Dockline, Prairie Steps, the South Ward. They were the people who knew these fables were true. They started sharing their own stories in the chat. But I was still scared. I was alone. I didn't know where Emilio was. I didn't know if he was winning his war or if he was even alive. I didn't know if he was still looking for me. I had to know. I announced a pop-up set on my channel, the Ashline Bridge. Midnight, it was exposed, stupid and neutral territory. I stood in the middle of the pedestrian walkway, the river dark and cold below me. My audience was a half-dozen homeless men and a few late-night commuters. I set up my small, battery-powered amp. I was terrified. "Hi," I said, my voice shaking. "You all know the city's in trouble." I took a deep breath, and I used the refrain. "It's so bad," I said. I was talking to a banker. I asked him, "Why don't you guys ever tell secrets?" I paused. The commuters kept walking. He said, "We just have no interest." Silence. My heart hammered. He wasn't here. His men were gone. I was alone. I tried the second one, my voice desperate. "My landlord is so cheap he's trying to charge me for emotional damages to the carpet." A cough from a man in a heavy coat, leaning on the railing 50 feet away, his back to me. My breath hitched. I finished the set, my last joke, so I went to the CIB. I asked them for the time. They said, for a price. The man on the railing didn't move, but a young woman, pushing an empty stroller, stopped. She dropped $1 in my open mic case, and I saw another man, buying a hot dog from the vendor at the end of the bridge, his eyes on me. They were here. They weren't suits. They were just people. An audience. He hadn't just put a tail on me. He'd built a perimeter. He was letting me walk. He was letting me be his equal. But he hadn't cut the rope. He was listening. The knowledge didn't make me feel safe. It made me feel bold. He had respected my note. He hadn't come for me. He had protected me at a distance. Now, I had to do my part. The next day, I went to my mother's storage unit. My account was frozen, so I couldn't pay. I told the manager I'd lost my key, while he was in the back looking for the bolt cutters. I picked the cheap lock with a bobby pin, a skill I'd learned in college, and slipped inside. The smell hit me first. Cedar, old silk, dust, it smelled like her. I spent 2 hours digging through boxes of patterns and dress forms, and I found it. Her old business ledgers. Tucked in the back was a thin file folder. Prairie Steps Market Association. And there it was, a single, yellowed, carbon copy receipt, an association fee payment for $10,000, paid to East Row Holdings, dated 6 years ago. 6 years! They hadn't just come for me, they had come for my mother. They had destroyed her shop, her life. This wasn't just about Emilio's borders anymore. This was about mine. I knew where to go. Father Simon. His mission was in the basement of the old St. Jude's Chapel, the one they had abandoned. He ran a soup kitchen and an unofficial shelter. He was the patron saint of the evicted. I found him sorting cans of green beans. He was a tall, impossibly thin man with a kind, tired face. "I know you," he said when I walked in. "You're the girl from the TV, the one who's lying." "No," I said, my voice flat. "I'm the girl from Prairie Steps, Rose Quill's daughter." His eyes sharpened. He remembered my mother. I showed him the receipt, East Row Holdings, 6 years ago. He put down the can of beans. "God help us," he whispered. He led me into a back room. It was lined with filing cabinets. He pulled one open. It was stuffed with files, hundreds of them. "I'm a priest, Talia. People confess, and they bring me their paperwork." He pulled out a file. An eviction notice from 8 years ago, signed by East Row, another from 7 years ago, another... He had the whole chain. He had the proof that the Arroyo CIB HFCO Hydra wasn't a new monster. It was an ancient one. "This is it," I whispered, pulling out the files. "This connects everything." The doors of the mission slammed open upstairs, heavy boots on the chapel floor. "CIB, search the building. We have a warrant." It was Bryce's voice. He wasn't suspended. He was hunting. "Go," Father Simon whispered, shoving me toward a curtain. "Now." I scrambled behind the curtain. It wasn't a hallway. It was an old, converted confessional, filled with boxes of donated clothes. I dove behind a stack of coats, my heart trying to escape my chest. I heard them. They were tearing the office apart. "Where is she, old man?" Bryce's voice. "And there's no one here but the lost," Father Simon said. I pulled out my burner phone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type. I texted the only number I had memorized, Emilio's. "CIB, St. Jude's Mission, Bryce. Don't come." It was a plea. It was a test. Don't be the excuse. I heard them getting closer. "Check the confessionals." A boot kicked the door. The light flooded in. I held my breath. "It's just old clothes, sir." "Check it anyway." A siren, a new one, not a police siren, a fire truck, loud, close, then another. "Sir," the CIB officer said, "we have a report, a 5-alarm gas leak at the building next door. They're evacuating the block." "What?" Bryce roared. "There's no gas leak, it's a false—" "Sir, the fire captain is ordering us to evacuate. Now." I heard them scrambling, swearing, running up the stairs. My phone vibrated. One text from Emilio. "The path is clear. Use the roof." He had listened. He hadn't come for me. He had come around me. He hadn't stormed the church. He hadn't started a firefight. He'd called the fire department. He'd used his power not like a hammer, but like a key. He'd given me the exit. I didn't wait. I ran. I scrambled up the stairs, out a side door, and into the alley. There was scaffolding on the side of the chapel. I climbed. I was halfway up when I slipped. My foot missed a rung, and I went sliding, tumbling down a canvas awning. I landed hard on something soft and hot with a loud, metallic twang. I was sitting in the middle of a waffle cart. I was covered in melted butter and maple syrup. The vendor, a kid in a paper hat, just stared at me, his spatula in midair. The CIB cars were screaming down the street, racing toward a gas leak that didn't exist. I was sticky. I was terrified. I was alive. And I just started to laugh. It wasn't a joke. It was a release. It was a raw, giddy, unstoppable sound. The fear had finally cracked. That night, I didn't hide. I took my mic, my amp, and the box of Father Simon's files, and I went to the corner of Ash and Dockline. I sat up on the sidewalk. "Hey, everybody," I said, my voice still sticky. "You'll never guess what happened to me today." I told them everything, the CIB, the waffle cart, and then I read them the names from Father Simon's files, the names of their neighbors, their mothers, their friends, who'd been evicted by East Row. My audience grew from 10 to 20 to 50. They weren't just watching. They were nodding. They were angry. I wasn't just a comedian. I was a witness. I ended my next laughing dumbbell live stream with a new message. I turned the camera on my face for the first time. "My name is Talia Quill, and I'm not strong. I'm just not standing alone anymore." In a dark room, in a high-rise I would never see again. Emilio De Laurentiis watched the live stream. He saw my face, my defiant, sticky, laughing face. He saw the crowd cheering. He saw the files I held up. He heard me use my real name. He saw me build my own army. He clenched the glass of whiskey in his hand, but he didn't move. He didn't send Evo. He didn't interfere. He was learning to trust me. I was walking back to the GCA studio when a figure stepped out of the shadows. "Juno?" She looked like a ghost. "Don't," I said, stopping. "I don't have anything to say to you." "I know," she said, her voice raw. "I know. Sorry isn't a word anymore. So I brought this." She held out her hand. It was a key, a heavy, industrial-cut key. "Warehouse 7, Waikio," she said. "Finch's office. He has a floor safe, under the rug. It's where he keeps the real ledgers, the ones he doesn't show Cole, the cash, the payoff lists." I just stared at her. "I've been atoning, she said. "I use my skills. I got in. I made a copy." She pushed the key into my hand. "You have to be careful, Talia. They're moving. Tonight, the gala leak, it shook them. They're pulling all the cash out of the city. It's a full-scale bug-out. Tonight's the last chance. After this, the money? Finch. All of it gone." I closed my hand around the cold, sharp metal. This was it, the final piece. I had the key. I had the community. I had the truth. I walked to the river, my mind clear. The old Talia would have run. The recent Talia would have given the key to Emilio. The new Talia, she was going to turn on the lights. I took out my burner phone. I typed in the coordinates for Warehouse 7. I sent them to Emilio. I followed it with one more message. "I'm going in. If you come, be last." The rain came back. It was a sign. The sky over Graybridge was weeping. A cold, miserable drizzle that slicked the pavement and turned the lights of Warehouse 7 into a greasy smear. This was it, the bug out. Inside, HFCO was in a state of controlled panic, a full inventory that looked more like a looting. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, Arroyo's men were loading pallets of seized goods onto unmarked trucks. They were emptying the piggy bank. "They're not just moving cash," Juno whispered, her voice tight in my ear. We were in a beat-up van half a block away, watching. "They're moving everything, art, electronics, cash. This is the end." "Not yet," I said. Our team was a joke, a beautiful, ridiculous joke. Father Simon, looking every inch the concerned clergyman, was driving a van marked St. Jude's Mission Relief Aid. Juno and I were in the back, wearing matching bright blue Community Response Team vests. "Juno, are you ready?" I asked. She nodded, her hand gripping a high-def camera. "I've leaked our position to 2 independent bloggers and a stringer I trust. They think they're covering a protest about the fund. They'll be here in 20 minutes. "Okay," I said, my heart a trapped bird. "Let's go." Father Simon drove the van straight to the front gate. Marlowe Finch was there, clipboard in hand, his face a mask of stress. "What the hell is this?" Finch barked, stepping in front of the van. Father Simon rolled down the window, his face a perfect picture of patient kindness. "My son, we're here for the perishable donations. We were told the Restoration Fund had several pallets of seized food items for the mission. With the unfortunate news, we were told to retrieve them before they spoil. Finch's eyes narrowed. It was the perfect bureaucratic nightmare for him. A priest, a charity, and bad PR, all while he was trying to commit a grand larceny. I don't have time for this, Padre. We're in a full inventory. A blue utility van, the kind you've seen 1,000 times, pulled up right behind us. 2 men in dark blue Graybridge Power and Electric uniforms got out. One of them was Ivo Wren. "Sorry, sir," Ivo said, his voice flat, not looking at Finch. "We got an anonymous tip about a non-compliant generator setup. Major fire code violation? We have to inspect the main breakers." Finch looked from the priest to the fake electricians. His escape plan was being snarled in red tape. "Fine," he roared. "Just fine, you." He pointed at Father Simon. "Stay by the loading dock. Don't touch anything, you two." He pointed at Ivo. "The breaker room is in the back. Stay out of my way." He stomped off, bellowing into a radio. We were in... Ivo and his man disappeared toward the back. Father Simon drove the van slowly into the cavernous warehouse. Juno and I hopped out, clipboards in hand, looking like we were supposed to be there. "Okay," I whispered to Juno. "You and Simon create the diversion. Log everything. Be as slow and annoying as possible. I'm going for the office." I split off, walking quickly, keeping my head down. Rule 3. No doorways. I stayed in the center of the massive aisles, moving between stacks of crates. I saw Ivo's man wedge a small device into the main breaker panel. Then Finch's voice echoed from the rafters. "What the hell? My office lights just went out. What are you idiots doing?" He'd seen the flicker. He was suspicious. He stormed past me, heading for the breaker room. "I've had enough of this," he snarled. He got to the breaker panel. He looked at the main switch. He looked at Ivo, who was standing there patiently. "You're not power company," Finch whispered. And he grabbed the main lever, throwing his full weight into it. He killed the power to the entire warehouse. The huge fluorescent lights popped and died. The loading bay doors whined to a halt. The entire cavernous space was plunged into absolute, terrifying darkness. A woman screamed. Men were shouting. This was it, the chaos. And then click, hiss, whum. A new light, not the harsh overheads, a network of brilliant blue-white LED floodlights mounted on magnetic tripods. Ivo's team, they hadn't just come to inspect the breakers. They'd brought their own grid. The light was tactical. It wasn't everywhere. It created islands of blinding light and new, deep shadows. It turned their home turf into our advantage. In the confusion, I ran. I slipped past the shouting, blinded men, and made for Finch's office. The key from Juno was slick in my hand. I jammed it into the lock, opened the door, and slipped inside. I shut the door, plunging myself into darkness. I pulled the rug back. There it was, a floor safe. I was fumbling with the combination dial Juno had given me when I heard them. Don't care what you promised him. That's my share, Kellen, Lysandra Cole's voice. Calm down. We have to get the hard ledgers and the cash, and then we burn the building. The CIB report will blame the riot. Bryce. They were coming here. No time. I left the safe. I scrambled behind Finch's huge metal desk. I fumbled in my pocket, pulling out the tiny button microphone I'd brought. I stuck it to the underside of the big cork bulletin board on the wall, right where they'd be standing. I pulled out my burner phone. I opened my laughing dumbbell stream. No video, just audio. I hit go live. The door opened. Light flooded the room. It was Cole and Bryce, and they looked terrified. "Where is he?" Lysandra hissed, pulling a stack of cash-filled envelopes from a filing cabinet. "Finch is handling the generator," Bryce said, yanking a heavy ledger from a drawer. "Now, the split." We agreed. 60-40. 60-40, Lysandra's laugh was a sharp, ugly sound. That was before your CIB goons let that comedian blow our gala to pieces. That was before my name was plastered all over the news. The fund is dead. My reputation is dead. I'm taking 70% or I walk out of here and leave you to explain this book to the feds. They were negotiating the spoils, live, for my entire audience. "You can't," Bryce stammered. Lysandra looked around the room, her eyes paranoid. Where is that idiot, Finch? Why is it so bright out there? Her eyes scanned the room, the desk, the chair, the bulletin board. She froze. Her eyes narrowed. She saw it, the tiny black dot of my mic, stark against the beige corkboard. "What?" she whispered. "Is that—" She didn't wait for an answer. Her hand dove into her designer clutch bag. It came out, not with a phone, but with a small, silver, snub-nosed pistol. I stopped breathing. My heart wasn't beating. It was just a solid, painful drum against my ribs. She raised the gun, aiming it at the bulletin board, at the microphone. "Wait!" Bryce yelped. The office door opened. We all turned. Emilio De Laurentiis. He wasn't in a suit. He was in his dark trousers and a simple black shirt, the white bandage on his arm a stark contrast. He wasn't holding a gun. His hands were empty, at his sides. He just stood there, filling the doorway. "Lysandra," he said, his voice quiet. She spun, the gun now aimed at his chest. "Get out of my way, Emilio. This doesn't concern you." "It does now." He took a single, slow step into the room. He didn't look at her. He didn't look at Bryce. He looked at me, huddled behind the desk. Then he looked at her. "She's the boarder." It was a statement, a fact. Before Lysandra could process it, the warehouse erupted. It wasn't a single shot. It was a war. A sustained rat-tat-tat of automatic fire from the loading bay. Bryce screamed and dove under the desk with me. Emilio didn't flinch. He just looked at the doorway. "What is that?" I gasped. "Nico," Emilio said, his voice tight with a cold fury. "He's not here to negotiate. He's here to take it all." Ivo's voice crackled in a small earpiece Emilio wore. "Boss, we're pinned Arroyo's men at the north dock. Nico's at the south. We're in a crossfire." Emilio looked at Lysandra, who was still pointing her gun, her hand shaking. He looked at me. He had a choice to make, his war or me. He chose his war. "Ivo, hold the line, I'm coming." He looked at me. One last hard look. "Handle this." And he was gone, disappearing into the chaos of flashes and screams. Lysandra, her face pale, looked at the open door, then at me. You did this." "No," I said, standing up. Bryce was still whimpering under the desk. "You did." I wasn't the target anymore. I wasn't the bait. I was the messenger. I looked past her, through the office window. I could see the whole chaotic scene. Men were fighting in the shadows, and high above it all, hanging from the rafters, was a massive, rolled-up banner, East Coast Restoration Fund. I grabbed the heavy ledger from Bryce's hand. "Hey," he yelped. I ran. I sprinted out of the office, out into the warehouse. The air smelled of gunpowder and ozone. "Talia, no!" I heard Juno scream from the loading bay. I ran for the gantry ladder, the one that led up to the main loading crane. I started to climb, the heavy ledger tucked under my arm. "Stop her!" Lysandra shrieked, running out of the office after me. I climbed, my arms burning. I reached the narrow metal walkway, high above the floor. The wind and rain were howling through a shattered skylight. I unhooked the banner. It was heavy. I unfurled it, letting it drop. It was 50 feet long, and on the back, in stark black letters, I saw the message Ivo's team must have prepared: Fund Ledger = Black Ledger. The independent press, the bloggers, were here. They were outside the gates, their cameras aimed at the warehouse. They saw the banner. They saw me. "Seize her," Bryce, finally emerging, pointed at me, screaming at a group of CIB officers who were just arriving. "CIB, arrest that woman." Down below, Emilio saw it. He saw the CIB moving toward the ladder. He started to move, to break from his fight, to come for me. He was breaking his promise. "No," I screamed. "Be last." He froze, caught between his instinct and my command. "Bay a chemical spill," Ivo's voice roared from the other side of the warehouse. Gas, evacuate." It was the diversion. The CIB squad, terrified of a chemical fire, stopped, turned, and ran toward Bay A. It gave me 120 seconds. You little roach, Lysandra's voice panted. She was on the gantry with me. Her hair was matted, her white dress stained, the gun was gone. She lunged at me, her hands like claws, going for the ledger. This was it. Not a fight with guns, a fight of wills. 50 feet in the air, the wind whipped the banner, almost pulling us both off the railing. It's over, Lysandra, I yelled over the wind. The city heard you. They're all listening. I will not be undone by a dockline rat, she screamed. She lunged again, grabbing for me. She slipped. Her heel slid on the wet metal. She went over the railing. I watched it happen in slow motion. Her scream, her eyes wide with terror. She managed to grab a steel cable. Stopping her fall, she was dangling, her fingers slipping, 50 feet above the concrete floor. Help me, she shrieked. Please don't let me fall. I looked down at her. The woman who'd tried to ruin me. The woman who'd helped ruin my mother. The woman who'd sent me the microphone. I could just walk away. I couldn't. I knelt, grabbing the railing. Give me your hand. I can't, I'm slipping. I let go of the railing with one hand, leaning out, grabbing her wrist. She was heavy. My shoulders screamed. I won't be like you, I grunted, pulling. She got one hand back on the railing. I pulled her, scraping her against the side until she was back on the gentry, sobbing and coughing. And I knew, in that moment, that Juno's cameras were rolling. The whole city just saw me save the woman who tried to destroy me. Down below, the fight had stopped. Everyone was watching. Emilio watched, his face unreadable. Nico Drager saw his chance. His boss, his rival, was distracted, exposed. Nico raised his pistol, aiming not at me, but at Emilio. Boss, Ivo yelled. Emilio didn't have time to turn. Ivo shoved him hard. Emilio stumbled, but the shot was already fired. It didn't hit Ivo. It didn't hit Emilio's chest. It hit Emilio in the side, a deep, tearing graze. He grunted, stumbling, clutching his ribs. A crimson stain bloomed on his black shirt, a single stroke of fate. The world exploded. City sirens, the CIB. Realizing the gas leak was fake, the crane's wailing proximity alarm, the flash of a dozen news cameras from the ground. The warehouse was a blinding, screaming symphony of light and sound. The heist was over. The war had just begun. I scrambled. The world was a mess of screaming sirens, flashing red and blue lights, and the shouts of men. But I didn't see any of it. My world had narrowed to one point of stillness in the chaos. Emilio, on one knee, his hand pressed hard against his side, his face pale in the flashing lights. I didn't take the ladder. I slid down a support cable, my hands raw, landing hard on the concrete. I ran. My hands should have been shaking. I'd just been on a gantry, 50 feet in the air, in a gunfight, and saved the woman who'd tried to destroy me. But my hands were steady. My eyes were clear. The fear was a cold, hard stone in my stomach, but my will was wrapped around it. He's bleeding, Ivo said, his face grim, his own gun still raised, covering our backs. It went through, Emilio grunted, trying to stand. It's fine. It's not fine, I said. It wasn't a question. It was a command. I tore at the massive vinyl banner that lay crumpled at my feet, the one that read Black Ledger. The fabric was thick, tough. I ripped a long, clean strip. Sit. He looked at me, surprised by the steel in my voice. He sat. I pushed his hand away from the wound. It was a deep, ugly graze, torn open along his ribs, bleeding heavily. Not a kill shot, but a bad one. I folded the strip of vinyl into a thick pad and pressed it, hard against the wound. He hissed, a sharp intake of breath, his whole body tensing. Look at me, I ordered. His dark eyes, clouded with pain, found mine. Breathe. Just breathe. 4 seconds in. Hold it. 4 seconds out. His breath was ragged. I'm not... Do it. He did. He watched my face, and he breathed. In, 2, 3, 4. Hold, out, 2, 3, 4. I didn't let go. I didn't look away. I was his anchor. I was his border. The chaos of the warehouse receded until it was just the sound of our breathing. His eyes, the cold, stormy sea, slowly cleared. The background noise resolved. The audio, my laughing dumbbell live stream of Kellen Bryce and Lysandra Cole negotiating their dirty split, had peaked. It had been playing for 10 minutes, coupled with Juno's data leak. It wasn't just a story anymore. It was an explosion. The city of New Avalon internal affairs, the real cops, were being forced to act. Kellen Bryce knew it. He was standing near a CIB cruiser, his face a mask of disbelief. The independent bloggers Juno had called were there, their cameras live, their lenses pointed right at his face. He'd tried to clean up the scene, but he'd lost control. The cameras were his new enemy. "Withdraw," he barked at his remaining CIB officers. "This is a secured scene. Internal affairs can handle the cleanup." He was already backing away, already crafting his lie. He was retreating. I looked over at Lysandra Cole. She was on her knees on the wet pavement, her white dress ruined. The two men who had been her personal bodyguards, the ones paid for by the Restoration Fund, were standing over her. One of them was holding her silver pistol. When she'd seen the cameras, she'd tried to run. "You can't do this to me," she sobbed. "I paid you." The taller bodyguard just shrugged. "The money's gone, lady." He pulled out a pair of handcuffs and snapped them on her wrists, pulling her to her feet. "Kellen Bryce may be a snake, but he's still a cop. We're making a citizen's arrest for him." They were cutting their losses, changing sides now that the money was gone. "Nico, he's running." It was Ivo's voice. I looked. Nico Drager, his face pale with rage and failure, was sprinting for a gap in the fence. Ivo raised his weapon. This was it, the law of the jungle. "Wait," Emilio grunted, his hand covering mine on the bandage. He didn't look at Ivo. He looked at me. His face was tight with pain, but his eyes were clear. "You decide," he said. The world stopped. Ivo waited, his finger on the trigger. Nico was almost at the fence. It was a simple choice, the smart play, the one Nico himself had offered, a trade, a body for peace. I thought of Mrs. Greer. I thought of the bullet in his side. I thought of the blood. "Bring him in alive," I said, my voice clear and steady. "No more blood." Emilio stared at me for one long, unblinking moment. Then he nodded. It was a small movement, but it felt like a tectonic plate shifting. He was ceding his power, his rule, to mine. "You heard her, Ivo," Emilio said. "Alive." Ivo grunted, annoyed, but he lowered his aim. He didn't shoot. He just spoke into his comms. "Cutter, Rogue, he's yours, non-lethal." Two shadows detached from the warehouse wall and took off in a dead sprint. The war was over. My way. A new sound cut through the sirens, a deep, resonant bong bong bong. I looked at the edge of the loading dock, by the entrance to his van. Father Simon was pulling the rope on a massive, salvaged brass bell from the old chapel. He was ringing it, over and over, a deep, clear sound that washed over the dirty warehouse, over the flashing lights, over the CIB and the press. It was a cleansing, a baptism for a city that had been drowning in its own grime. The rain stopped. As if the bell had ordered it, the chaos began to organize. The real cops, the IA detectives, were moving in, taping off the scene. The bloggers were interviewing a terrified, babbling Kellen Bryce. Juno was handing her camera's memory card to a stern-looking woman in a suit. It was over. Emilio pushed himself to his feet, still holding the bandage to his side. He didn't look at his empire. He didn't look at the cops. He just looked at me. I stood up. We were in our own small, quiet bubble. The sirens were a mile away. The lights were a backdrop. I reached up, my hand trembling, finally, and brushed the wet hair off his forehead. He closed his eyes. I put my forehead against his. We just stood there, breathing each other's air, 2 heartbeats. Finally in sync. No smoke, no promises, no threats, just here. He let out a long, slow breath. A small smile touched the corner of his mouth. "I bet," he whispered, his voice rough, "you still think I'm a criminal." I closed my eyes, a single hot tear of pure, unadulterated relief finally breaking free, tracing a path through the grime on my cheek. "Worse," I whispered back, "you're my boarder." He kissed me. It wasn't the desperate, rain-soaked kiss of the glass house. It was slow, it was warm, it was trust, it was relief. His hand came up, not to my waist, but to my back, holding me steady, as if I were the one who was wounded. My hand went to his cheek, my thumb tracing the sharp line of his jaw. The cameras were gone. The cops were busy. This moment was not for them, it was for us. The aftermath was a symphony. The CIB was dismantled, investigated by Internal Affairs. Kellen Bryce was facing federal charges. The HFCO was put under state receivership. The East Coast Restoration Fund was dissolved, its assets seized and, in a beautiful, karmic twist, turned over to Father Simon to manage for the actual community. Emilio's war with Nico ended before it began. With the Arroyos and the CIB broken, his power was absolute. He didn't have to fight. He'd won. And the Lantern Workshop, the school for the kids in Dockline, received its first ever public grant from the city, funded by the seized assets. 2 nights later, I was standing in the warm, safe quiet of the glass house. He had offered, "The glass house, your old apartment, anywhere you want." He was standing by the window, watching the city lights. His arm was in a proper sling now, his shirt clean. "I have a gig," I said. He turned. "The Blue Lamp. They're calling it a special engagement. You don't need to work there anymore. Talia, I know," I said, stopping him. "It's not for the money. It's for the jokes." He nodded. He understood. "Do you want me to come for protection?" "No," I said, walking toward him. "I want you to come as an audience." He smiled, a real one. It lit up his whole face. "What's the topic?" "Boarders," I said. I opened my show that night. The Blue Lamp was packed. It wasn't just regulars. It was Father Simon and Mrs. Greer, her arm in a bright pink cast. It was Juno, sitting in the back, her press pass on a lanyard, her face pale but determined. And it was Emilio, sitting in the VIP booth, alone. I tapped the mic. "So, I bet you're all wondering what I've been up to." The crowd laughed. "I've been learning about real estate, about borders, about how some people draw them with fences and some people draw them with laws." I leaned in. "And some people are just worse than a criminal." The crowd roared. Emilio just watched me, that small, private smile on his face. I told them about the rain. I told them about the fear. I told them about a man who learned to stand behind the person he loved, instead of in front of them. That night, when I got back to the glass house, I took the small, silver fishbone charm from around my neck. For weeks, it had been a warning, a claim, a target. I hung it on a small nail by the glass door, where it would catch the morning light. It wasn't a warning anymore. It wasn't a marker of his territory. It was a promise, a reminder that you draw your own borders with courage, and you hold them with love. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'm curious, where in the world are you listening from? Let me know in the comments so we can connect and share our thoughts. Please subscribe to my channel, Mafia Boss Stories, like this video, and give it a super thanks by hitting the hype button to help this story reach even more listeners.